Good evening and welcome everyone. I think we may have some people who are still arriving, but let's get started anyway. It's wonderful to see all of you here this evening for our very special event. My name is Scott Slovic, and I am a faculty member and department chair in the English department at the University of Idaho. And I'd like to thank a few people who've made this event possible before introducing our guests and explaining how things will work tonight. This week's visit by Terry Tempest Williams and Brooke Williams is the result of a collaborative effort between the English departments at Washington State University and the University of Idaho. In addition to tonight's event, Terry and Brooke will be visiting classes at WSU tomorrow and will read together at 5 o'clock tomorrow evening in the Cub Auditorium on the WSU campus. I would especially like to thank Professor Debbie Lee from WSU for her help in organizing this visit. We're grateful too to Jenny Kostroff and the 1912 Center for hosting tonight's gathering. Thanks as well to the students and faculty members from Idaho's MFA program in creative writing who set up chairs here this afternoon and will help with takedown later tonight. And then thanks as well to Carol Sperling and Book People for handling book sales. In fact, as I mentioned a minute ago, the sale of books, and especially this new edition of The Story of My Heart, a new edition of an 1883 book by Richard Jefferies, will be central to tonight's event. Participation, engagement, love of language, and the natural world. These ideas come to mind immediately when we think of our special guests tonight, Terry Tempest Williams and Brooke Williams. Terry and Brooke, writers, teachers, naturalists, and activists, represent the very best of the contemporary renaissance of environment-oriented writing and thinking in American culture. I know that many of you are familiar with their deeply moving books, such as Refuge and Unspoken Hunger, Leap, Half-Lives, Red, and Finding Beauty in a Broken World. Last week, in my courses on environmental writing and eco-criticism at the University of Idaho, I discussed Terry's 2012 book, When Women Were Birds, with my students, and a number of students came up after each class to tell me how moved they were by this astonishing book. This kind of reaction, this sense of making a deep personal connection with someone else's writing doesn't happen every day, but it does when we read the work of these two writers, Terry and Brooke. They have a special gift for making us pay attention to words and the world, and a gift for paying attention, such attention themselves, and for caring. And that brings us here for tonight's unusual event. This will not be, as I said earlier, a typical passive reading. It's a kind of experiment, actually. A typical reading where distinguished visitors take the stage and the rest of us sit back and quietly listen. Participation, engagement, love of language, and the natural world. These shared values brought Terry and Brooke to Jefferies' The Story of My Heart in a bookshop in New England several years ago, as Terry explains in her introduction to the 2014 edition published by Torrey House Books. They purchased an antique edition of the book and became, as Terry puts it in her introduction, and as I think Brooke will explain in a few minutes, obsessed with Jefferies' words, reading the book aloud to each other and deciding to create a new edition of it, not really editing or changing the original book, but rather curating a beautiful edition that looks as if it had been published in Jefferies' own time in a beautiful Victorian-style binding, but with new commentary by Terry and Brooke. They actively participated in Jefferies' work by reading it aloud to each other and by interacting with the text in coordinating this new edition. So tonight, I would like to provide an opportunity for us not only to hear Terry and Brooke talk about and read from Jefferies' work, but for as many other people as possible who have copies or who are able to pick up copies of Jefferies' book to fill this room with their own reading voices. Tomorrow evening, as I mentioned, Terry and Brooke will give what I expect to be a more conventional reading, but tonight we'll do something different, a participatory reading. Here's how the evening will work. In a moment, I will invite Terry and Brooke to come up and talk about the Story of My Heart project, and then read a few paragraphs each from the opening chapter. I'll then read a paragraph before passing the microphone on to the next person and the next. We actually have a second microphone, so we can have people just kind of lined up here at the microphones. So Terry and Brooke will start things off by speaking and reading for 10 or 15 minutes. Then we'll listen to other voices, each reading a few sentences or so. Jefferies' paragraphs are sometimes a bit long. For another 10 minutes or so. Then I'll invite Terry and Brooke to come up and participate in the reading for several paragraphs, and then back to the rest of us. And we'll follow this rotation for about an hour. And then, when we have approximately 20 minutes to go before the end of our scheduled time, which is 7 o'clock, I'll ask Terry and Brooke to read a few final paragraphs from Jefferies' work before spending 15 minutes or so doing Q&A. I'll keep track of time, and please don't be offended if I interrupt some readers and suggest that we pass along the microphone, because we don't want any one reader to dominate the stage. The idea, again, is to fill this space with as many different voices as possible, engaging with Richard Jefferies' words. Then at 7, we'll end the formal recitation, and Terry and Brooke will go up to the Book People table in the hallway and sign books. And we've scheduled about half an hour for this, and then we need to get them to another event that starts at about 7:45. So please share them with other people who want to have their books signed. I've attended many book signings with Terry and Brooke, and I know these can be epic affairs. So we're trying to be fairly efficient with that, and there will be other opportunities, especially tomorrow evening, to have them sign books. So now, without further delay, it's my great honor and pleasure to welcome Terry Tempest Williams and Brooke Williams and Richard Jefferies to Moscow.
Good afternoon, I'm Terry, and I just want to say, first of all, it is such a joy to be back here in Moscow, Idaho. We're neighbors at the University of Idaho and at Washington State. I've missed being here in this beautiful landscape of the Palouse and wheat fields and these beautiful colors, so thank you. So many dear friends here. Gary McFarland, who is one of my heroes in terms of a true environmental wilderness warrior. Thank you for your beautiful work and for holding the line in this state. Teresa Cohn is my sister, my chosen sister, and I'm so grateful that she's here and now part of the staff and faculty at the University of Idaho working her magic. And I just want to thank you, Debbie, for partnering with Scott, and we've had this wonderful afternoon with various colleagues. And Susie, thank you for your partnership. And I really want to pay tribute to Scott Slovic. I wish we could run him for President of the United States. It would be participatory, I know that. I've known Scott for over 3 decades. I think, you know, it's hard to ever say that one person is singularly responsible for anything, but I truly believe that Scott Slovic is singularly responsible for the literature of the environment. And I'm thrilled that you're here in Idaho at the university. I'm thrilled that you're here in the West. And I mean what I say. I know that people such as myself, Scott, have a voice in this world because of you and what you have advocated for us and how you've translated for us in ways where no one else has. You know, we have a lot of critics, and I don't mean just academic critics, I mean critics about wildlands and wild places, and you have really extended the conversation so far beyond what we ever knew possible, and I just want to personally thank you. Scott's so humble. What he didn't tell you is that he is also part of this reissuing of this gem book of The Story of My Heart by Richard Jefferies. He wrote the afterword that is the smartest thing in the whole book. And what I can tell you is when Brooke and I, in 2011, thought we had struck gold by finding this unknown writer, a Brit who was a mystic, who was an advocate of farmers, who was a great naturalist, and really, I just felt a kindred spirit. It was a revelation. When we called Scott, he said, "Oh yes, I love Richard Jefferies." And of course he would have known all along. Quickly, I will just tell you how this happened and then turn it over to Brooke, and then we'll each read a paragraph and then turn it over to you, which I love as a participatory moment. We were in Maine on vacation. There's a wonderful village called Stonington. Perhaps some of you have been there. There's a great old bookstore called Prints and Reprints, run by a fabulous woman named Jackie Burnett, who sits buried behind books with her glasses down by her nose. We always love to go there. They have a special section on E.B. White, one of my favorite books in the world, The Wild Iris. I found there, that was one of E.B. White's stories as he was advancing the United Nations as a concept. But this particular day, there was this wonderful corner mahogany bookshelf, armoire almost. And there I was struck by a very small book, not fancy, kind of a beige linen construction cover. It had a gold embossed cross and a crown, which I thought was interesting. And then in very simple letters, The Story of My Heart. Of course, the boldness of that title caught my attention. I started flipping through the pages, and I have to tell you, my eyes have no fidelity whatsoever. If they want to go somewhere else, they do. But they had enormous fidelity to this text. And as I started reading paragraph after paragraph, I kept thinking, who is this writer? And look back, Richard Jefferies, 1883. I absolutely fell in love and read in place for over half an hour. Finally, Brooke said, "What on earth are you doing?" And I said, "Have you ever heard of this man?" We started reading out loud. Let's get it. We can continue reading out loud. It was $75. We didn't have it. We put it back. We left. And I couldn't get it out of my mind. We came back. There the book still was. We asked Jackie if we could purchase it. And she said, "Did you get it over in that corner?" We said yes. And she said, 66% off on all of it. So it turned out to be like $25. And it started us on a beautiful journey. We ended up going to the rocky shore of Maine, and that afternoon at low tide, till high tide, I must tell you, we sat on those rocks and read Jefferies out loud to us. And we not only fell in love with Richard Jefferies for his love of language, for his insistence on what he calls soul life, for the mystical intelligence that he dared to project, as well as the bedrock love that he held for the land itself in his own locale of walking every day the same path over and over again. Not only did we fall in love with Richard Jefferies, but I have to tell you, we fell in love with each other again in a way we couldn't have imagined, by reading together in place, wild places, wild words. And I will just close this one section with this. How willingly I could strew the path of all with flowers. How beautiful a delight to make the world joyous. The song should never remain silent, the dance never still. The laugh should sound like water which runs forever. How pleasant it would be each day to think, today I have done something that will render future generations more happy. I will search the world for beauty.
Hello, thank you so much for being here, and like Terry said, to all of you who helped put this together. I was saying to Scott earlier that this book came out a year ago, and for the 2 or 3 years prior to that, I was really obsessed with it. And then it sort of disappeared, and other things kind of occupied my mind. And when we knew we were coming here, I picked it up again, and I thought, oh, now I remember why I was obsessed, and I can go all back to that again. Terry mentioned that Scott's a big part of this book. He's in the back. He says something that really, to me, says everything about the book. He says how the process of going out into the world guides the human consciousness toward a richer, more meaningful contemplation of what it means to be alive and to be human. And this is, to me, the essence of, I think, my obsession, is that Jefferies had a very slight education. I think he went to elementary school and maybe a little high school, but didn't really know much from that perspective. He read a lot, and he had a lot of books that really meant a lot to him. But mainly, everything that's in this book, all the philosophy, all the wisdom that attracted us, kind of came up through the soles of his feet, just by wandering. And I write a little bit in here about the difference between walking and wandering. And I think it's a lesson to be learned in this generation where now, if we're walking, we've got a goal, or we have a GoPro that we're filming, and when we walk faster, we can be sure to get it onto social media quickly. But just the act of wandering, I think, is something that we're losing, and I want to remember how to do it and to constantly do it. My obsession has a little bit to do with this growing theory that I have, which is that the dead are not too far away from us. And I've been thinking this for a while, and at a certain point I thought, well, maybe I'm going a little insane by thinking these things. But then we found a book by a writer named Robert Pogue Harrison called The Dominion of the Dead. I don't know if any of you have heard of this book, but I opened it up and I immediately felt like I had a cohort, at least one member of a group that believed the same thing, and that we could kind of correspond about this. And in the introduction to that book, he says that the dead have a close relationship to the unborn. The former hound the living with guilt, dread, and a sense of responsibility, obliging us by whatever means necessary to take the unborn into our care, to keep the story going, even if we never quite know what the story is about, what our part is in it is, the end toward which it is progressing, or the moral it contains. And I really felt like Jefferies sort of tapped me, and it was my job to sort of continue this story of his, that he was out there somewhere thinking that maybe he's being forgotten. And in fact, from my perspective, he was forgotten. And I asked hundreds of people if they'd ever heard of Richard Jefferies as we got into this. And even especially people with like a British accent, I would hear in talking in line at a movie or someplace, and I would say, "Are you from England?" And they would say, "Yes." And I would say, "Well, tell me about Richard Jefferies." And they would say, "Who are you talking about?" They didn't even know about him. But a year or so before the book came out, Scott and I were at the University of Utah, and I asked him, and then, like Terry said, he knew about Richard Jefferies. And not only that, we had a very interesting conversation about Richard Jefferies. And I think that speaks well of Scott to be that well read. And I even found a copy, a different edition on his shelf today. So, and he introduced us to the idea that Richard Jefferies and Rachel Carson were really close. So this is a growing family, and we felt like it was our responsibility to get this out into the world again. We have an antiquarian book dealer friend in Moab, Utah, and he sort of got obsessed with this too. And when he introduced us at a reading when the book first came out, he said, "It's interesting that Brooke and Terry have been the ones tapped in this generation to bring Jefferies out into the public." And he turned around and he pulled up a stack of books about this high of all the different editions of this book that have been over the years reissued. So we're part of a long stream of people that have been sort of tapped. And for me it was really an obsession. Terry would have to warn me when we went out to dinner with friends that it was not a proper place for me to talk about Richard Jefferies. And we have one friend that finally just said, when we met her for dinner, said, "Brooke, are we going to talk about Richard Jefferies again?" So it was a big part of my life for a while, and I think I learned a lot about my life and about sort of the greater world, which is something I've always been fascinated in. But again, I just want to credit Scott with really giving me the confidence to realize that I wasn't really insane, and it was really a worthy project to take part in. So with that, let's start reading it.
The story of my heart commences 17 years ago, in the glow of youth. There were times every now and then when I felt the necessity of a strong inspiration of soul thought. My heart was dusty, parched for want of the rain of deep feeling, my mind arid and dry, for there is a dust which settles on the heart, as well as that which falls on a ledge. It is injurious to the mind as well as to the body to be always in one place and always surrounded by the same circumstances. A species of thick clothing slowly grows about the mind. The pores are choked. Little habits become part of existence, and by degrees the mind is enclosed in a husk. When this began to form, I felt eager to escape it, to throw off the heavy clothing, to drink deeply once more at the fresh foundations of life. An inspiration, a long deep breath of the pure air of thought, could alone give help to the heart.
Is this on? Thank you. There is a hill to which I used to resort at such periods, the labor of walking 3 miles to it, all the while gradually ascending, seemed to clear my blood of the heaviness accumulated at home. On a warm summer day, the slow, continued rise required continual effort, which carried away the sense of oppression. The familiar, everyday scene was soon out of sight. I came to other trees, meadows, and fields. I began to breathe a new air and to have a fresher aspiration. I restrained my soul till I reached the sward of the hill. Psyche, the soul that longed to be loose. I would write psyche instead of soul to avoid meanings which have become attached to the word soul, but it is awkward to do so. Clumsy indeed are all words the moment the wooden stage of commonplace life is left. I restrained psyche, my soul, till I reached and put my foot on the grass at the beginning of the green hill itself.
I'll now read the next paragraph, but I'd like to invite people who are interested in joining the reading to start coming up so that we can continue as smoothly as possible. So please do make your way up here as I'm reading this. Moving up the sweet green turf, at every step my heart seemed to obtain a wider horizon of feeling. With every inhalation of rich, pure air, a deeper desire. The very light of the sun was whiter and more brilliant here. By the time I had reached the summit, I had entirely forgotten the petty circumstances and the annoyances of existence. I felt myself. There was an entrenchment on the summit, and going down into the fosse, I walked round it slowly to recover breath. On the southwestern side, there was a spot where the outer bank had partially slipped, leaving a gap. There the view was over a broad plain, beautiful with wheat, and enclosed by a perfect amphitheater of green hills. It's like he was living in the Palouse.
I know.
Through these hills there was one narrow groove, or pass, southwards, where the white clouds seemed to close in the horizon. Woods hid the scattered hamlets and farmhouses, so that I was quite alone. Walter, why don't you get up here?
Well,
Who's next? Okay, please come over here and let's just kind of move seamlessly from one reader to the next. Why don't other people come up and join us as well? Yeah.
So I
Walter.
had just arbitrarily opened a paragraph, but it seemed like a nice, or,
My idea was that we might continue with the same.
I thought I was
You chose your own paragraph.
serendipitous.
Why don't you read your paragraph and then we'll return to the first paragraph.
Because I saw this, and this reminds me of Dickinsons Snake poem. Or suddenly there is a rustle like a faint hiss in the grass, and a green snake
Which
glides
page?
over the bank. 87.
87.
Of course. The breath in the chest seems to lose its vitality. For an instant, the nerves refuse to transmit the force of life. It's a narrow fellow in the grass, after all. The gliding yellow, there you go, streaked worm is so utterly opposed to the ever-present idea in the mind. Custom may reduce to horror, but no long pondering can ever bring that creature within the pale of the human idea. These are so distinctly opposite and anti-human that thousands of years have not sufficed to soften their outline. Various insects and creeping creatures excite the same sense in lesser degrees. Animals and birds in general do not. The tiger is dreaded, but causes no disgust. The exception is in those that feed on offal. Horses and dogs we love. We not only do not recognize anything opposite of them, but we come to love them.
All right, well, okay, I'll go over here. It's probably the only time I'm following orders. I was utterly alone with the sun and the earth. Lying down on the grass, I spoke in my soul to the earth, the sun, the air, and the distant sea far beyond sight. I thought of the earth's firmness. I felt it bear me up. Through the grassy couch there came an influence as if I could feel the great earth speaking to me.
I thought of the wandering air, its pureness, which in its beauty the air touched me and gave me something of itself. I spoke to the sea, though so far in my mind I saw it green at the rim of the earth and blue in deeper ocean. I desired to have its strength, its mastery and glory, mystery and glory. Then I addressed the sun, desiring the sole equivalent of his light and brilliance, his endurance and unwearied race. I turned to the blue heaven over, gazing into its depth, inhaling its exquisite color and sweetness. The rich blue of the unattainable flower of the sky drew my soul towards it, and there it rested, for pure color is rest of heart. By all these I prayed. I felt an emotion of the soul beyond all definition. Prayer is a puny thing to it, and the word is a rude sign to the feeling. But I know no other.
I'm going to read from the chapter Evolution, which is not Richard Jefferies. Actually, this is Brooke speaking, and I like this because
Which page?
it's 158. It offers some context. Opinions of those who've read The Story of My Heart cover the full spectrum from love to disdain. I'm most interested in those who disliked it intensely and those whom it completely inspired. W.H. Hudson, British author, naturalist, and ornithologist, best known for his exotic romances, especially Green Mansions, found The Story of My Heart embarrassing, and bordering on insanity. Harold Massingham, a prolific Brit, who wrote about the English countryside and agriculture and was also a poet, found the story of my heart to be, quote, a thoroughly bad book, utterly chaotic, full of contradictions and repetitions, lacking in artistry, the morbid outpourings of a sick and disappointed man. On the other hand, John Fowles, the Englishman who wrote The Collector, The Tree, The French Lieutenant's Woman, cites Jefferies as an intellectual mentor along with Camus and Sartre. Fowles wrote an introduction to Jefferies' novel After London, in which a huge winter storm wreaks death and destruction on the city, not so far-fetched with the recent polar vortex experience in the United States. This is, quote, his prose, Fowles writes, referring to Jefferies, is, quote, like nature itself, end quote. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to get us back on track here. Page 31 again. By the blue heaven, by the rolling sun bursting through untrodden space, a new ocean of ether every day unveiled, by the fresh and wandering air encompassing the world, by the sea sounding on the shore, the green sea, white flecked at the margin, and the deep ocean, by the strong earth under me. Then returning, I prayed by the street time, whose little flowers I touched with my hand, by the slender grass, by the crumble of chalky earth I took up and let fall through my fingers. Touching the crumble of earth, the blade of grass, the thyme flower, breathing the earth's circling air, thinking of the sea and the sky, holding out my hand for the sunbeams to touch it, prone on the sword in token of deep reverence. Thus I prayed that I might touch to the unutterable existence infinitely higher than deity.
With all the intensity of feeling which exalted me, all the intense communion I held with the earth, the sun and sky, the stars hidden by the light, with the ocean, in no manner can the thrilling depth of these feelings be written. With these I prayed, as if they were the keys of an instrument or of an organ, with which I swelled forth the note of my soul, redoubling my own voice by their power. The great sun burning with light, the strong earth, dear earth, the warm sky, the pure air, the thought of ocean, the inexpressible beauty of all filled me with rapture and ecstasy and inflatus. With this inflatus, too, I prayed. Next to myself, I came and called myself my bodily existence. I held out my hand, the sunlight gleamed on the skin and the iridescent nails. I recalled the mystery and beauty of the flesh. I thought of the mind with which I could see the ocean 60 miles distant and gather to myself its glory. I thought of my inner existence, that consciousness which is called the soul. These, that is myself, I threw into the balance to weigh the prayer the heavier. My strength of body, mind, and soul, I flung into it. I put forth my strength. I wrestled and labored and toiled in might of prayer. The prayer, this soul emotion, was in itself not for an object. It was a passion. I hid my face in the grass. I was wholly prostrated. I lost myself in the wrestle. I was wrapped and carried away.
Becoming calmer, I returned to myself and thought, reclining in rapt thought, full of aspiration, steeped to the lips of my soul in desire. I did not know then, define or analyze or understand this. I see now that what I labored for was soul life, more soul nature, to be exalted, to be full of soul learning. Finally I rose, walked half a mile or so along the summit of the hill eastwards, to soothe myself and come to the common ways of life again. Had any shepherd accidentally seen me lying on the turf, he would only have thought that I was resting a few minutes. I made no outward show. Who could have imagined the whirlwind of passion that was going on within me as I reclined there? I was greatly exhausted when I returned home. Occasionally I went upon the hill deliberately, deeming it good to do so. Then again, this craving carried me away up there of itself. Though the principal feeling was the same, there were variations in the mode in which it affected me.
Sometimes on lying down on the sward, I first looked up at the sky, grazing for a long time, till I could see deep into the azure and my eyes were full of color. When I turned my face to the grass in time, placing my hands at each side of my face so as to shut out everything and hide myself, having drunk deeply of the heaven above, and felt the most glorious beauty of the day, and remembering the old, old sea, which as it seemed to me was but just to yonder at the edge, I now became lost and absorbed in the being of existence of the universe. I felt down deep into the earth, under and high above into the sky, and farther still to the sun and the stars, still farther beyond the stars into the hollow of space, and losing thus my separateness of being came to seem like a part of the whole. Then I whispered to the earth beneath, through the grass and time, down to the depth of its ear, and again up to the starry space hid behind the blue of the day. Traveling in an instant across the distant sea, I saw as if was the actual vision of the palms and coconut trees, the bamboos of India, and the cedars of the extreme south. Like a lake with islands, the ocean lay before me, as clear and vivid as the plain beneath in the midst of the amphitheater of hills.
With the glory of the great sea, I said, with the firm, solid, and sustaining earth, the depth, distance, and expanse of ether, the age, tamelessness, and ceaseless motion of the ocean, the stars and the unknown in space, by all those things which are most powerfully known to me, and by those which exist, but of which I have no idea whatever, I pray. Further, by my own soul, that secret existence which, above all other things, bears the nearest resemblance to this ideal of spirit, infinitely nearer than earth, sun, or star. Speaking by an inclination toward, not in words, my soul prays that I may have something from each of this, that I may gather a flower from them, that I may have in myself the secret and meaning of the earth, the golden sun, the light, the foam-flecked sea. Let my soul become enlarged. I am not enough. I am little and contemptible. I desire a greatness of soul, an irradiance of mind, a deeper insight, a broader hope. Give me power of soul so that I may actually affect by its will that which I strive for.
This is page 66. Jumping to page 66. Okay.
Realizing that spirit, recognizing my own inner consciousness, the psyche, so clear I cannot understand time. It is eternity now. I'm in the midst of it. It about me in the sunshine. I am in it as the butterfly floats in light-laden air. Nothing has to come. It is now. Now is eternity. Now is the immortal life. Here, this moment, by this tumulus on earth. Now, I exist in it. The years, the centuries, the cycles are absolutely nothing. In the only moment, since the tumulus was raised in 1,000 years, it will still be only moment. To the soul, there is no past and no future. War is and will be ever in now. For artificial purposes, time is mutually agreed on, but it really no such things. The shadow goes on upon dial. An index moves around the clock. And what is the difference? 9 to 10. If the clock had never been set going, what would be the difference? There would be time for the clock. The clock will make time for itself. They're none for me. Thank you.
So back to page 35. In summer, I went out into the fields and let my soul inspire these thoughts under the trees, standing against the trunk or looking up through the branches of the sky. If trees could speak, hundreds of them would say, I had had these soul emotions under them. Leaning against the oak's massive trunk and feeling the rough bark and the lichen at my back, looking southwards over the grassy fields, cowslip yellow, at the woods on the slope, I thought my desire of deeper soul life. Or under the green firs, looking upwards, the sky was more deeply blue at their tops. Then the brake fern was unrolling, the doves cooing, the thickets astir, the late ash leaves coming forth. Under the shapely rounded elms, by the hawthorn bushes and hazel, everywhere the same deep desire for the soul nature. To have from all green things and from the sunlight the inner meaning which was not yet known to them, that I might be full of light as the woods of the sun's rays. Just to touch the lichened bark of a tree or the end of a spray projecting over the path as I walked seemed to repeat the same prayer in me.
The long-lived summer days dried and warmed the turf in the meadows. I used to lie down in solitary corners full length on my back so as to feel the embrace of the earth. The grass stood high above me and the shadows of the tree branches danced on my face. I looked up at the sky with half-closed eyes to bear the dazzling light. Bees buzzed over me. Sometimes a butterfly passed. There was a hum in the air. Green finches sang in the hedge. Gradually entering into the intense life of the summer days, a life which burned around as if every grass blade and leaf were a torch. I came to feel the long-drawn life of the earth back into the dimmest past, while the sun of the moment was warm on me. Sisystrus, on the most ancient sands of the south in ancient days, was conscious of himself and of the sun. This sunlight linked me through the ages to that past consciousness. From all the ages, my soul desired to take that soul life, which had flowed through them as the sunbeams had continually poured on earth. As the hot sands take up the heat, so I would take up that soul energy. Dreamy in appearance, I was breathing and full of existence. I was aware of the great grass blades, the flowers, the leaves on hawthorn and tree. I seemed to live more largely through them, as if each were a pore through which I drank. The grasshoppers called and leaped, the green finches sang, the blackbirds happily fluted. All the air hummed with life. I was plunged deep in existence, and with all that existence, I prayed.
I'm going to move us ahead just as a counterpoint, again, to the chapter that Walter was reading from. This is page 84. There is nothing human in nature. The earth, though loved so dearly, would let me perish on the ground and neither bring forth food nor water. Burning in the sky, the great sun, of whose company I have been so fond, would merely burn on and make no motion to assist me. Those who have been in an open boat at sea without water have proved the mercies of the sun and of the deity who did not give them one drop of rain, dying in misery under the same rays that smile so beautifully on the flowers. In the south, the sun is the enemy. Night and coolness and rain are the friends of man. As for the sea, it offers us salt water which we cannot drink. The trees care nothing for us. The hill I visited so often in days gone by has not missed me. The sun scorches man, and willing his naked state, roast him alive. The sea and the fresh water alike make no effort to uphold him if his vessel founders. He casts up his arms in vain. They come to their level over his head, filling the spot his body occupied. If he falls from a cliff, the air parts. The earth beneath him dashes him to pieces.
Back to 37. Through every grass blade in the thousand grasses, through the million leaves, veined and edge-cut on bush and tree, through the song notes and the marked feathers of the birds, through the insects' hum and the color of the butterflies, through the soft, warm air, the flecks of clouds dissolving, I use them all for prayer. With all the energy the sunbeams had poured unwearied on the earth, since Istrosis was conscious of them on the ancient sands, with all the life that had been lived by vigorous man and beauteous woman, since first in dearest Greece the dream of gods was woven, with all the soul life that had flowed a long stream down to me, I prayed that I might have a soul more equal to, far beyond my conception of, these things of the past, the present, and the fullness of all life. Not only equal to these, but beyond, higher and more powerful than I could imagine, that I might take from all their energy, grandeur, and beauty, and gather it into me, that my soul might be more than the cosmos of life.
I'll jump a little bit to page 67, the last line. On page 67, last line. There is no separation, no past, eternity. The now is continuous. When all the stars have revolved, they only produce now again. The continuity of now is forever, so that it appears to me purely natural and not supernatural, that the soul whose temporary frame was entered in this moment should be existing as I sit on the soil. How infinitely deeper is thought than the million miles of the firmament. The wonder is here, not there, now, not to be, now, always. Things that have been miscalled supernatural appear to me simple, more natural than nature, than earth, than sea or sun. It is beyond telling more natural that I should have a soul than not, that there should be immortality. I think there is much more than immortality. It is matter which is the supernatural, and difficult of understanding. Why this cloud of earth I hold in my hand? Why this water which drops sparkling from my fingers dipped in the brook? Why are they at all? When? How? What for? Matter is beyond understanding, mysterious, impenetrable. I touch it easily, comprehend it. No. Soul, mind, the thought, the idea is easily understood. It understands itself and is conscious.
Back to 37. I prayed with the glowing clouds at sunset and the soft light of the first star coming through the violet sky. At night with the stars according to the season, now with the Pleiades, now with the Swan or burning Sirius, and broad Orion's whole constellation. Red Aldebaran, Arcturus, and the Northern Crown, with the morning star, the light bringer, once now and then when I saw it, a white gold ball in the violet purple sky, or framed about the pale summer vapor, floating away as red streaks shot horizontally in the east. A diffused saffron ascended into the luminous upper azure.
The disk of the sun rose over the hill, fluctuating with throbs of light. His chest heaved in fervor of brilliance. All the glory of the sunrise filled me with broader and furnace-like vehemence of prayer, that I might have the deepest of soul life, the deepest of all, deeper far than all the greatness of the visible universe and even of the invisible, that I might have a fullness of soul, till now unknown and utterly beyond my own conception. In the deepest darkness of the night, the same thought rose in my mind as in the bright light of noontide. What is there which I have not used to strengthen the same emotion?
We're going to move to chapter 2. Sometimes I went to a deep, narrow valley in the hills, silent and solitary. The sky crossed from side to side like a roof supported on two walls of green. Sparrows chirped in the wee at the verge above, their calls falling like the twittering of swallows from the air. There was no other sound. The short grass was dried gray as it grew by the heat. The sun hung over the narrow vale as if it had been put there by hand. Burning, the sun glowed on the sward at the foot of the slope where these thoughts burned into me. How many years, how many cycles of years, how many bundles of cycles of years had the sun glowed down thus on that hollow? Since it was formed, how long? Since it was worn and shaped groove-like in the flanks of the hills by mighty forces which had ebbed. Alone with the sun which glowed on the work when it was done, I saw back through space to the old time of tree ferns, of the lizard flying through the air, of the lizard dragon wallowing in sea foam, the mountainous creatures, twice elephantine, feeding on the land, all the crooked sequence of life. The dragonfly which passed me traced a continuous descent from the fly marked on stone in those days. The immense time lifted me like a wave rolling under a boat. My mind seemed to raise itself as a swell of the cycles came. It felt strong with the power of the ages. With all that time and power, I prayed that I might have in my soul the intellectual part of it, the idea, the thought. Like a shuttle, the mind shot to and fro, the past and the present in an instant.
Full to the brim of the wondrous past, I felt the wondrous present. For the day, the very moment I breathed, that second of time then in the valley was as marvelous, as grand, as all that had gone before. Now, this moment was the wonder and the glory. Now, this moment was exceedingly wonderful. Now, this moment gave me all the thought, all the idea, all the soul expressed in the cosmos around me. Give me still more, for the interminable universe, past and present, is but earth. Give me the unknown soul, wholly apart from it, the soul of which I know only that when I touch the ground, when the sunlight touches my hand, it is not there. Therefore, the heart looks into space, to be away from earth. With all the cycles and the sunlight streaming through them, with all that is meant by the present, I thought in the deep veil and prayed.
I thought I would punctuate this again with Brooke Williams. This reminded me of Wallace Stevens quite a lot. It's on page 134. I love gathering small stones I find while wandering in the desert. This habit got out of hand, and now I'm limited to one jar. Once filled, Terry and I agreed I would need to take some stones back outside before I could bring any new ones in. While I'd like to keep them all, the jar cannot expand.
So I'll read as we wait for more people to come up and line up to read. This is page 46 again. There was a secluded spring to which I sometimes went to drink the pure water, lifting it in the hollow of my hand. Drinking the lucid water, clear as light itself in solution, I absorbed the beauty and purity of it. I drank the thought of the element. I desired soul nature, pure and limpid. When I saw the sparkling dew on the grass, a rainbow broken into drops, it called up the same thought prayer. The stormy wind whose sudden twists laid the trees on the ground woke the same feeling. My heart shouted with it. The soft summer air which entered when I opened my window in the morning breathed the same sweet desire. At night, before sleeping, I always looked out at the shadowy trees, the hills looming indistinctly in the dark, a star seen between the drifting clouds, prayer of soul life always. I chose the highest room, bare and gaunt, because as I sat at work, I could look out and see more of the wide earth, more of the dome of the sky, and could think my desire through these. When the crescent of the new moon shone, all the old thoughts were renewed. No one else is lining up. Are we finished?
We have some here.
Okay. Oh, good. Oh, great. Please stand up here so you're ready to go. Okay. So we're on page 47. Okay. Let's jump to page 104.
This fits a little in what Scott just did. After the sensuous enjoyment always came the thought, the desire, that I might be like this, that I might have the inner being of the sun, the light, the earth, the trees and grass, translated into some growth of excellence in myself, both of body and of mind. Greater perfection of physique, greater perfection of mind and soul, that I might be higher in myself. To this oak I came daily for a long time, sometimes only for a minute, for just to view the spot was enough. In the bitter cold of spring, when the north wind blackened everything, I used to come now and then at night to look from under the bare branches at the splendor of the southern sky. The stars burned with brilliance, broad Orion and flashing Sirius. There are more or brighter constellations visible then than all the year. And the clearness of the air and the blackness of the sky, black not clouded, let them gleam in their fullness. They lifted me, they gave me fresh vigor of soul. Not all that the stars could have given, had they been destinies, could have satiated me. This, all this and more, I wanted in myself.
Back to page 47. All the succeeding incidents of the year repeated my prayer as I noted them. The first green leaf on the hawthorn, the first spike of meadow grass, the first song of the nightingale, the green ear of wheat. I spoke it with the ear of wheat as the sun tinted it golden, with the whitening barley, again with the red gold spots of autumn on the beach, the buff oak leaves, and the gossamer dew waited. All the larks over the green corn sang it for me, all the deer swallows. The green leaves rustled it. The green brook flags waved it. The swallows took it with them to repeat it for me in distant lands. By the running brook I meditated it, a flash of sunlight here in the curve, a flicker yonder on the ripples, the birds bathing in the sandy shallow, the rush of falling water. As the brook ran winding through the meadow, so one thought ran winding through my days.
Who's next? The sciences I studied never checked it for a moment, nor did the books of old philosophy. The sun was stronger than science, the hills more than philosophy. Twice circumstances gave me a brief view of the sea. Then the passion rose, tumultuous as the waves. It was very bitter to me to leave the sea. I'm still waiting for someone else to pick up the baton.
Sometimes I spent the whole day walking over the hills, searching for it, as if the labor of walking would force it from the ground. I remained in the woods for hours, among the ash, sprays, and the fluttering of the ringed doves at their nests, the scent of pines here and there, dreaming my prayer.
My work was most uncongenial and useless. But even then, sometimes a gleam of sunlight on the wall, the buzz of a bee at the window, would bring the thought to me, only to make me miserable, for it was a waste of golden time while the rich sunlight streamed on hill and plain. Do you like to read?
I think this is the tall person. There was a wrenching of the mind, a straining of the mental sinews. I was forced to do this. My mind was yonder. Weariness, exhaustion, nerve illness often ensued. The insults which are showered on poverty, long struggle of labor, the heavy pressure of circumstances, the unhappiness, only stayed the expression of the feeling. It was always there. Often in the streets of London, as the red sunset flamed over the houses, the old thought, the old prayer came. Not only in grassy fields with green leaf and running brook did this constant desire find renewal. More deeply still, with living human beauty, the perfection of form, the simple fact of form, ravished and always will ravish me away. In this lies the outcome and end of all the loveliness of sunshine and green leaf, of flowers, pure water, and sweet air. This is embodiment and highest expression, the scattered, uncertain, and designless loveliness of tree and sunlight brought to shape. Through this beauty I prayed deepest and longest, and down to this hour, the shape, the divine idea of that shape, the swelling muscle or the dreamy limb, strong sinew or curve of bust, Aphrodite or Hercules, it is the same. That I may have the soul life, the soul nature, let divine beauty bring me divine soul. Swart Nubian, white Greek, delicate Italian, massive Scandinavian, and all the exquisite pleasure the form gave and gives, to me immediately becomes intense prayer.
If I could have been in physical shape like these, how despicable in comparison I am. To be shapely of form is so infinitely beyond wealth, power, fame, all that ambition can give, that these are dust before it. Unless of the human form, no pictures hold me. The rest are flat surfaces. So too with the other arts. They are dead, the potters, the architect, meaningless, stony, and some repellent, like the cold touch of porcelain. No prayer with these. Only the human form in art could raise it, and most in statuary. I have seen so little good statuary, it is a regret to me. Still, that I have is beyond all other art. Fragments here, a bust yonder, the broken pieces brought from Greece. Copies, plaster casts, a memory of an Aphrodite, of a Persephone, of an Apollo, that is all. But even drawings of statuary will raise the prayer. These statues were like myself, full of a thought, forever about to bust forth as a bud, yet silent in the same attitude. Give me to live the soul life they express, the smallest fragment of marble carved in the shape of the human arm will wake the desire I felt in my hill prayer.
This is page 130. The great sun shone above, the wide sea was before me. The wind came sweet and strong from the waves. The life of the earth and the sea, the glow of the sun filled me. I touched the surge with my hand. I lifted my face to the sun. I opened my lips to the wind. I prayed aloud in the roar of the waves. My soul was strong as the sea and prayed with the sea's might. Give me fullness of life like to the sea and the sun, to the earth and the air. Give me fullness of physical life, mind equal and beyond their fullness. Give me a greatness and perfection of soul higher than all things. Give me my inexpressible desire which swells in me like a tide. Give it to me with all the force of the sea.
Page 181. United effort through geological time is in front is but the beginning of an idea. I am convinced that much more can be done, that the length of time may be almost immeasurably shortened. The general principles that are now in operation are of the simplest and most elementary character, yet they have already made considerable difference. I am not content with these. There must be much more. There must be things which are at present unknown, by whose aid advance may be made. Research proceeds upon the same old lines and runs in the ancient grooves. Further, it is restricted by the ultra-practical views, which are alone deemed reasonable. But there should be no limit placed on the mind. The purely ideal is as worthy of pursuit as the practical, and the mind is not to be pinned to dogmas of science any more than to dogmas of superstition. Most injurious of all is the continuous circling on the same path, as it is from this that I wish to free my mind.
My English is not good, but I want to say thank you for Tempest, because your book gave me, encouraged me to read English, to study English very hard, so I want to say thank you. So I want to read the Tempest word, 24 page. Richard Jefferies felt the world deeply and dared to confront the mysterious. He was relentless in his quest to name the ineffable. He was a lover of beauty. This is what we forget. Beauty is what opens our eyes to love. Love ignites passion, and passion is what propels us towards a future fraught with risk and uncertainty. He was a man who lived with his eyes wide open. I lived in looking. Richard Jefferies said, "May we not avert our gaze." Thank you.
So I'll read one more paragraph, then I'll ask Terry and Brooke each to read another paragraph, and then stay up here and we'll have a conversation, maybe Q&A about this project or other aspects of their work that you're interested in knowing more about. I'm looking at page 214, where Jefferies writes, "I have been obliged to write these things by an irresistible impulse, which has worked on me since early youth. They have not been written for the sake of argument, still less for any thought of profit, rather indeed the reverse. They have been forced from me by an earnestness of heart, and they express my most serious convictions. For 17 years, they have been lying in my mind, continually thought of and pondered over. I was not more than 18 when an inner and esoteric meaning began to come from me, from all the visible universe, and indefinable aspirations filled me. I found them in the grass fields, under the trees, on the hilltops, at sunrise, in the night. There was a deeper meaning everywhere. The sun burned with it. The broad front of morning beamed with it. A deep feeling entered me while gazing at the sky in the azure noon and in the starlit evening."
I hope succeeding generations will be able to be idle. I hope that 9/10 of their time will be leisure time, that they may enjoy their days and the earth and the beauty of this beautiful world, that they may rest by the sea and dream, that they may dance and sing and eat and drink. I will work towards that end with all my heart. If employment they must have, and the restlessness of the mind will require it, they shall not work for bread, but for their souls.
(126) The idea of the pilgrimage was to get away from the endless and nameless circumstances of everyday existence, which by degrees build a wall around the mind so that it travels in a constantly narrowing circle. This tether of the faculties tends to make them accept present knowledge and present things as all that can be attained to. This is all, there is nothing more, is the iterated preaching of the house life. Remain, be content, go round and round in one barren path, a little money, a little food and sleep, some ancient fables, old age and death. Of all the inventions of casuistry with man for ages has, in various ways, which manacled itself and stayed its own advance, there is none equally potent with the supposition that nothing more is possible. Once well impressed on the mind that it has already all, that advance is impossible because there is nothing further, and it is chained like a horse to an iron pin in the ground.
Why don't we give a hand to all of our readers? And now, Terry and Brooke, if you don't mind coming up here, maybe we can open things up for more of a conversation about this project.
Can I just say that it was brand new. I read this book 25 times to do the project, and it's like a whole other dimension was added to it, hearing it through all these different voices. So thank you so much.
Where are we?
Where are we?
Where are we in this?
If only we could say page 37.
Now, you said more specific, you know, we realize natural world or Sarah Jude or Thoreau or Muir. And so, where are we here? Are we
So maybe a little more clarity on the question.
specific, where is this hill? Where's the coast?
Oh, that, you're talking literally, not
no, I
the
didn't
universe.
I was thinking that was the question.
Well, that too.
I thought you were just making a statement, so I was just going to stand
And I was going to launch into, well, E.O. Wilson said if we're going to get through the bottleneck, we have to have half Earth wild. But where are we?
Near Swindon, England. Have any of you seen pictures or seen the actual green hills with really amazing white chalk horses on the sides of them? It's that part of England, south of London.
And very near Bath.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, he grew up on a little farm there, which is now the Richard Jefferies Museum, which is open on Wednesdays in the summer.
And it just happened when we wrote to them and said that we would love to come and see the museum and walk where he walked. Would it be open? And they said, it just so happens we're open that very day. And it just so happens it's our once a year board of directors meeting. So we were able to meet the friends of Richard Jefferies and the curator, who spoke of Richard Jefferies as though he was still in the room in the house.
And actually,
with a tone of gossip.
And he is. There's a model of him in his bed upstairs. In his room.
He's been in this room tonight.
That's right. He was.
This was so beautiful. You know, you realize how, I will speak for myself, how hungry I am to be read to. You know, how wonderful it is to have a communal reading. It was such a wonderful gesture. And I heard him differently in each person's voice as they owned those words. Yes?
I think I will pick up on the where are we question. It's interesting that it's placed so specifically that you can give a very specific description of where he was when he was writing it. But there's also the account of the two of you reading it to one another, so grounded, lying down and reading it. So I was wondering if you see it as a text that grounds or a text that transports. in another place?
I think no question for me is that it grounds, and I wouldn't be surprised if I went and reread it in another place. Like, I feel like it was written for this place based on the character and the spirit with which you all read it. But I think you could take it almost any place. I think there's a few very specific things that he refers to that, you know, aren't that important when it comes right down to knowing where the location is. But I think it grounds me. It really grounded me.
What a great question. I would have 2 points. One, just right here. Here a beautiful star shines clearly. Here a constellation is hidden by a branch, a universe by a leaf. What I love about Jefferies is he takes your eyes upward to the cosmos, and he absolutely grounds you in the roots of trees. What he did for me as a writer is I realized how cautious I have become, how controlled and disciplined with my language to be credible. And when I read Jefferies, I felt that it was just this open door to be rhapsodic, to be passionate, to be mad, to be insane, to be wise, to be sorrowful, to lament, to yearn, to love. And as a writer, I felt completely liberated by him. Yes?
Would you folks care to expand on this soul-nature concept, please?
I'm going to let Brooke do that, but I will read one thing because I think what's so interesting about Jefferies is his sense of paradox, because on one hand, it sounds like religious language, right? And yet he denounced God. And you heard many passages that were more akin to Buddhism than Christianity. But what I loved was his definition of prayer, and that also has affected me. And here he says, by prayer, I do not mean a request for anything preferred to a deity. I mean intense soul emotion, intense aspiration. So to me, when he talks about prayer, he's talking about attention to a soul life, to an earth that can be seen in relationship, that he did not view the earth as static. That on one hand, yes, there was the inglorious difference of nature, but on the other side, it was deeply infused with reciprocity.
I took that really literally in terms of he used the word soul and psyche interchangeably, and I really am a sort of a closet Jungian psychologist, or at least a fan of Carl Jung, and the idea of the psyche being the complete consciousness, the personal and the collective unconscious, and that's what I see he was talking about, is this deep inner self that's connected to, you know, every human that ever lived, the collective unconscious, and that is sort of where he was living from my perspective. Does that answer your question?
Thank you so much for a glorious evening of words and Jefferies and Roots and Stars.
So let me also thank you for sharing your voices and your fascination with and concern for words and the natural world. We will have book signing up in the hallway behind the room here, and remember, Terry and Brooke will give a reading tomorrow at 5 in the Cub Auditorium over at WSU. Thanks, everyone.